Okay, hello Year 12 and welcome to the second lesson on Kantian Ethics. So we'll start with a quick summary of the things that were discussed last time. Moral duty is a priori for Kant. Accessible through reason. Actions are deontological, always right and wrong because reason never changes. Moral duty is worked out through the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative simply means your duty in every situation, and it's your duty because you are a human being who is capable of using reason. The three formulations are what we're going to be looking at in today's presentation. Okay, so the first formulation of the categorical imperative, universalizability. So I would like us to start by thinking about a thought experiment. What would happen if you lied about your A-level results on your university application and you got away with it? So just think about that for a second. Well, you might say, this would be great. If I lied and I got away with it and I could get into any university that I wanted to. Now, what would happen if everyone lied about their A-level results in university applications? Think about that for a second. Well, this is a slightly trickier. Let's imagine every single person got an A star. Well, the university probably would think something funny is going on and would no longer accept A-level results as a means of differentiating between pupils. So A-level results would be worthless. So if everyone constantly lied about their A-level results, universities wouldn't ask for A-level results anymore. So would you want to lie about your A-level results if A-level results were worthless? Well, the answer is no, you wouldn't, because what's the point? The universities don't trust them anymore, and they're not looking for the A-level results anymore, so there'd be no point lying anymore. Now, if you understand what we've just gone through, then you should understand the first formulation of the categorical imperative. So, if we all follow our duty and use our unique human ability to apply reason, then we'll discover that lying doesn't make logical sense. Because the whole institution of truth, the fact that people trust each other, that makes lying desirable, would collapse if everyone did it. And it's a categorical imperative because you have to follow it, because it's logically true before experience. You can work it out in your head. You don't need to conduct an experiment to see if that lying isn't possible. You can work it out in your head, a bit like 2 + 2 = 4. So this is called an internal contradiction. Let's imagine another example. I want to be a bachelor and married. Now, a bachelor is an unmarried man. Now, if you could be a bachelor and married, then bachelor wouldn't mean bachelor anymore. In which case, you couldn't be a bachelor and married. So this is worked out just through reason. It's logical. It's logic. And Kant applies the same things to ethics. So, lying, for example, Kant says it's not universalizable. That means we can't all do it at the same time. And if you can't all do it at the same time, then it can't be your duty. So let's imagine I want to lie about my A-level results. Well, the first thing Kant says is you need to imagine what would happen if everyone did it. That's what universalizability means. Make it universal. Okay, ethics doesn't exist for just me. It should exist for everybody because everybody is a part of the community. So, morality is for everyone. So what would happen if everyone did this? Well, if everyone did this, there'd be no A levels to take anymore. And therefore, you wouldn't be able to lie about your results because you wouldn't be taking A levels if everyone lied about it. So to universalize the statement or the intention actually negates the ability to perform the action in the first place. So lying is never allowed for Kant. Never allowed. Because you can't universalize it. If everyone did it, you wouldn't be able to do it anymore. It's logically inconsistent. So before you perform any action according to the first formulation of the categorical imperative, you need to universalize your intention. So let's think about another example. Let's imagine you want to kill someone that you don't like. I'm going to pause the video now. I'd like you to think to yourself, can this be universalized? So remember, moral duty is for everyone. So what would happen if everyone did this? Would you be able to do it if everyone was doing it? Okay, so let's work this out. If everyone was killing, then I could be killed, which would mean I wouldn't be alive to kill. So the statement contradicts itself. I can't kill whoever I want to because then I could be killed. And if I'm killed, then I can't kill. So killing is never allowed, according to Kant, because it's not universalizable. We can't all do it at the same time. Killing is logically inconsistent. It's a priori, which means you can work it out before experience. Excuse me. So, it's an imperative because reason tells us it's our duty to never kill and to never lie. It's not hypothetical. It's not something we should do in some situations. It's something we should do in every situation because it's never universalizable. So it can never be our duty. Okay, so what would happen, let's go back to this example, if everyone lied about their A-level results, the A-level system would collapse completely, there'd be no A-levels to lie about anymore. Therefore, it's a categorical imperative not to do it because it is a rule that everyone must follow if they thought about it logically. Therefore, it's our duty not to lie because reason has discovered this rule, and it's our duty to follow reason as it is unique to us. So in an essay, this is the kind of thing you should be writing with an example, and you can use this example if you want to. So that's universalizability, and it's the first formulation of the categorical imperative. Because moral duty is for all people, would I still be able to perform this action if everyone performed it as well? Now let's think about, should I help people? Is that universalizable? Well, if I help people, let's imagine that everyone is helping people. Would I be able to keep helping people? Well, the answer is yes. So there are some things which are universalizable. So helping people, you're allowed to do, but lying and killing, you're not allowed to do because you couldn't all do it at once, and morality is for everyone. Is swearing universalizable? Just think about this one to yourself. Well, the answer is yes, it is. If I swore, before I swore, let's imagine everyone was swearing. If everyone's swearing, can we keep swearing? Yes, we can. Now, does that mean it's a duty to swear? Well, no, because Kant says even though it is universalizable, even though we can all still do it, we wouldn't want to live in a world where everyone was swearing. And so swearing is a contradiction in the will, whereas killing is a contradiction in nature. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more depth later on. So this is the kind of thing you should be writing in an essay. Kant's first formulation of the categorical imperative is known as universalizability. Kant says And it's always good to use Kant's quotes. So it always acts in such a way that you can also will that the maxim of your action should become a universal law. Maxim just means the rule of your action. This means before performing an action, we must be able to logically entertain that it can withstand being a moral law for all. If all follow this and I can no longer follow the rule, it's not universalizable and hence not our moral duty. And notice it's worked out before experience. You just need to imagine it in your heads. That's what Kant means by the synthetic a priori. So, swearing at people. So this is logically possible, so it's not a contradiction in nature. A contradiction in nature is when a maxim, when universalized, becomes a logical contradiction. Lying and killing are contradictions in nature. They're not possible if everyone did them at the same time. And therefore Kant says that they're perfect duties. Do not lie, do not kill are perfect duties because it's a contradiction in nature to universalize lying and killing. Swearing at people is not a contradiction in nature. This is because we can all do it at the same time. It is, however, a contradiction in the will. Contradiction of the will means we can do it, but we wouldn't want to. Don't swear at people is not a perfect duty, it's an imperfect duty. So Kant says some things are our duty more than others. And things that are contradictions in nature are our perfect duties. And things that are a contradiction in the will are imperfect duties. So you've got a duty to never kill, and you've got a duty to never swear, but it's not as binding a duty as never kill or never lie. Is abortion universalizable? Take a few moments to think about this to yourself. Okay, well, Kant is going to be against abortion. Against abortion. And that's because if everybody aborted their child, abortions wouldn't be possible. Why is that? Well, if everyone aborted their child, there would be no humans left, in which case there would be no humans to have pregnancies to abort. So abortion is never acceptable. So having an abortion is not logically possible, therefore it's a contradiction in nature. Abortion can't all be done at the same time. So contradiction in nature is when something can't be done by everybody at the same time. Contradiction in the will is where things can be done at the same time, but you wouldn't want them to be. So let's think about these. Abortion. Yes. Contradiction in nature. Lying. Contradiction in nature. Stealing. Now, stealing is actually a contradiction in nature as well. If everybody stole, then there wouldn't be anything known as property left. No one would own anything because everything would be stolen from everybody else. And it's not possible to steal things if no one owns things anymore. So Kant says, do not lie, do not kill, and do not steal are perfect duties. So summary, always act in such a way that you can also will that the maximum of your action should become a universal law. So this means only use free will in a way that we can all use free will at the same time. This is about respecting other people. You can't perform an action and then only desire yourself to get away with it. Morality is for all people, so all people must be doing it at the same time. And it must be respecting other people. If you can't all do it at once, then you shouldn't be doing it. It's a priori true. Killing cannot be a moral duty for all human beings, just like a triangle cannot have four sides. It's a priori true. A priori reason. If it had four sides, it wouldn't be a triangle. Killing cannot be our duty, because duty is for all people. If all people killed, then we couldn't complete our duty anymore, because you'd be dead. Okay, so that's the first formulation. The second formulation states, treat humanity never solely as a means, but always also as an end. So what does it mean to treat someone as a means? Well, when you treat someone as a means, that means that you are using them to get something else. So, for example, you could be killing someone in order to take their organs, or you're pushing the fat man off the bridge in order to stop the train. You should always treat someone as an end. What Kant means by end is treat humans as valuable in their own right. Remember, human beings are unique because we can use reason, and therefore you have to respect them. So never treat someone solely as a means to an end. Don't use people. That's what it means. Don't use people. Instead, respect them. So it follows from the first formulation and provides some content. Universalizing our actions implies also that we treat other rational beings as ends, valuable in themselves, and therefore with respect. It would be inconsistent to favour some people and not others, so our duties apply to all and reflect the universal value of all human beings. It's similar to the religious command that we treat others as we ourselves wish to be treated. Now, clearly, sometimes you can't avoid using people, and Kant says you can use people as a means, but never solely as a means. You have to use people as a means to an end. You're using me as a means to an end right now. I am being used by you to get a good A-level grade. I'm also treating you as a means to an end. Me teaching you allows me to get paid every month. The difference is you can't use me and I can't use you as just a means to an end. But I have to respect you as a human being in your own right. And what does that respect look like? Well, you have to respect my freedom and my reason. So if I was tied to the desk and forced to teach you, then you're treating me as just or solely a means to an end, and that's not right. But the fact that I have chosen to teach you means that you're treating me as a means and an end. So an end in itself is a valuable human being. So this means we should never treat someone as a tool for another goal, but treat them as a valuable person in their own right. So Kant is going to be against pushing the fat man off the bridge. Because in this situation, you're just using him. You're treating him like a sack of potatoes, like something which is heavy, in order to achieve a goal, a good consequence. And human beings are the ultimate goal of moral behavior because they are valuable in their own right, so should never be used as just a means to an end, but always respected. So Kant's going to be against pushing the fat man off. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Why should we treat someone as valuable in their own right, as an end? So just pause the video now and think about this. According to Kant, why should we treat someone as an end? Okay, well, Kant's answer is going to be because human beings are the only thing in the universe that are capable of using reason and having freedom. And therefore, they must be respected. And it's a contradiction. Let's think about universalizability. It's a contradiction to not respect someone else's reason because you yourself have reason. So if you don't respect their reason, why should they respect your reason? So you can use anything else in the world as a tool and then throw it away. Okay? Chair, a piece of wood, food, animals, but not human beings. So they contain the only thing that's good in itself, remember? The only thing that's good in itself is the goodwill, which is the ability to act according to reason. So there's this idea in Kantian Ethics that reason should respect reason. So before you make an ethical decision, you have to respect other people's abilities to make ethical decisions. So slavery is going to be wrong because you're treating someone as just a means to an end. Now, if you set the slaves free and they chose to do the same work, then you'd be treating them as a means to an end, but also an end in themselves because they're choosing to do the work. And that's the big difference. So you can use people in Kantian ethics. You can never merely or solely use them. Now, it's not possible, linking to the first formulation, it's not possible to universalize using people without respecting their reason, because then if everyone was using people and not respecting them, then you wouldn't be able to use people and to respect them because you would be being used. An easier way of saying this is to think about slavery. We'll look at that in a second. So an end is something valuable in its own right, and a means is a tool for gaining something else. We can treat humans as a means, but never as just a means, also at the same time as an end. Okay, so I can use a spanner as a means to an end. It's only useful to me because it helps me to tighten some screws, and I don't have to respect the spanner. I can throw it away if I want to. An iPod, similar, means to an end. I don't have to respect it. Now, a human, that's a different matter. Let's think about this person in the picture. This is a waiter, and they're about to serve you a burger. Are you using them as a means to an end? Well, the answer is yes, you are. They are a means, a tool, for you to be able to eat your burger. And that's okay as long as this person is freely choosing to do it. And you're respecting them as an end in themselves. So if they're a slave, it's not acceptable. But if they've chosen this job, it is acceptable. So, someone who's working at Costa Coffee, are we using this person as a tool, or are we respecting them as a human in their own right? Well, the answer is both, because she's choosing to work there, because she is free to use her reason. She's not being forced to do anything. But at the same time, you are still using her as a tool to help you to get your coffee that you need in the morning. Teacher, same thing. They're being used as a means for your education, but they're choosing to do it, so they're being respected as an end as well. Now, somebody who's working in a sweatshop, we've got to link Kantian ethics to business ethics. Somebody who is being paid very little and making shoes, are they being treated as a means or an end in themselves, or as both? Think about that to yourself. So just pause the video and think about that. Well, this gets a little bit complicated because you could argue, I mean, obviously she's being used as a means, okay? Because we're using her as a tool to make shoes. But is she also being respected as an end in herself? And that all comes down to whether she's being allowed to freely and rationally make the decision to be there. And this is where you can go into detail in an essay. Maybe she is choosing to be there, but maybe she's not. Maybe she's in such poverty that she's almost being forced into this job because she's being paid so little and she would starve if she wasn't doing it. So there's no straightforward answer to this, and this is where it gets interesting when you apply Kantian ethics to business ethics. The fat man example, obviously this person is being treated as just a means to an end. So this is never all right. Okay, so the second formulation, treat humanity never solely as a means, but also as an end. Treat someone as a valuable individual life rather than just a tool. Remember, you can treat someone as a tool, but never just or solely as a tool. And this follows from universalizability. And that's because you'd never be able to universalize treating someone as just a tool. Because if you were treating someone as just a tool, then everyone was treating someone as just a tool, then you'd be treated as just a tool. In which case you couldn't treat others as just a tool because they're treating you as just a tool. That might sound a little complex, but we'll look at it now with the example of slavery. Okay, so slaves are a classic example of people who were treated as just a means to an end. They were just used as a tool for farming or labor. And they were not treated as an end because they weren't respected as free human beings. You cannot universalize slavery. I'll say that again. You cannot universalize slavery. Why is that? Just pause the video and think about that to yourself. Okay, this is why you can't universalize slavery. If everyone owned a slave, you would be owned. I'll say that again. If everyone owned a slave, you would be a slave as well. So if we look at this picture, imagine this person owns this person, and 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 this person owns this person. If everyone owns each other, then you don't own anyone. Because you own this person, let's imagine, you're this person and you own this person. But this person here owns you, which means this person actually owns this person. And this person actually owns this person because this person owns this one person, and it goes round and round and round and round. And what it amounts to is that nobody owns anybody. So treating someone as a slave, as just a means to an end, is never universalizable. So the formulations of the categorical imperative are related. Okay, so what it amounts to is only use free will to perform actions that respect others' abilities to use free will. If through my free action I choose to not respect another person and just use them as a means to an end, I'm not really using reason, because moral duty is universal for all people. If all people used people as a means to an end, then I would be used as, and would not be able to use anyone else as a means to an end. Okay? Third formulation, act on the assumption that all others would also act in the same way. Now, the third formulation is not really anything new. It's a combination of the first and the second. It's an extension of universalizability. It's a bit of both, actually. So Kant says, act as if your example were going to be a law followed by all people. So that's universalizability. In a kingdom of ends. A kingdom of ends just means a world where everyone is treated freely. So this part is the first formulation, followed by all people. And this part is a little bit of the second formulation. So really, all this means is, before you perform an action, imagine if it was a law that everyone was following, would you be able to live in a world where everyone was treated equally? So really, it's nothing new. I've always thought that it's really just a combination of the first and the second formulation. Okay? So, Kant's quote, act in such a way that you become a legislating member in a universal kingdom of ends. So legislating means your action becomes a law, becomes legal, in a universal kingdom of ends for a world where everyone's treated equally. So only act in a way that would, if it was a law, create a kingdom of really acting wills. We should only act in a way that, if all acted, would create a kingdom of ends. A kingdom of ends is just a world where everyone is free to perform their duty and everyone is performing their duty. So, a summary of the categorical imperative. This is Kant's ethics then. Only do what we can all do at the same time. Respect others as an end in themselves. And act as if your example were going to be law followed by all people. So quite straightforward, really. It's complex in the details, but really it just means be consistent and respect other people. Okay? So, duty for Kant is to act according to reason. This is a quick recap. It's categorical imperative because reason states that these must be followed for morality to exist at all. If we want to have a moral community, you have to follow these three formulations. They are a precondition or a prerequisite of morality, which means it wouldn't be possible to be moral at all, or to be free at all, or to use reason at all, unless all three of these things are being done at the same time. Okay, so a kingdom of ends is a world where everybody is treated equally and everybody is free to use their reason. Slavery is obviously not a kingdom of ends because some people are not being treated as an end. Stealing is not a kingdom of ends because you are not respecting other people's possession of property. Okay? In fact, you're not universalizing, or you're not able to universalize stealing because if everyone stole, there wouldn't be anything to make anymore. There wouldn't be anyone who had any incentive to make things anymore, in which case you couldn't keep stealing it. So this isn't a kingdom of ends. Now, an AO2 question is a kingdom of ends actually possible? Is it possible to live in a world where nobody lies? Where everybody said to the Axeman, my mum's upstairs? Because you can't universalize lying. If we lied to the Axeman, we'd be taking away his reason, his ability to freely make the right choice. So you can't lie. So is it possible? Well, even Kant says that it's probably not, which maybe is a weakness of his theory. His theory is very idealistic. It's aiming for a world which maybe isn't possible. So let's imagine someone says, I'm going to lie to my parents and go to a party tonight. This person isn't performing their duty because lying isn't universalizable. But people lie every single day. So is Kant being unrealistic? Interesting question. Okay, so Kant offers 4 concrete examples of the categorical imperative. You shouldn't commit suicide, not universalizable. If everyone killed themselves, there'd be no one left to kill themselves. You shouldn't break promises. If everyone broke promises, there'd be no promises left because no one would trust anyone anymore. You shouldn't be lazy, but develop our talents. If everyone was lazy, we'd live in a world where people were lazy and this wouldn't be what we want. And we shouldn't ignore the happiness of others, but we should help them. If we ignore the happiness of others, then they may ignore the happiness of you if everyone did it, in which case we would live in a world that we wouldn't want to live in. Now, 2 of these are perfect duties, and 2 of these are imperfect duties. Remember, perfect duties are things that you have to do because universalizing them is, or universalizing the opposite, is a contradiction in nature. An imperfect duty is something that you can universalize the opposite, but you wouldn't want to. So pause the video now and think to yourself which one are perfect duties and which one are imperfect duties. Okay, well the answer is we should not commit suicide is a perfect duty because it's not possible to universalize suicide. It's a contradiction in nature. Next, you should not break promises but keep trust. Perfect duty. Because it's not possible to universalize breaking promises. It's the same as lying. So it's a contradiction in nature. Don't be lazy but develop our talents. Well, you can universalize being lazy, but you wouldn't want to. So it's a contradiction in the will. So it's an imperfect duty. And we should not ignore the happiness of others but help them. Well, you can universalize ignoring the happiness of others, but we wouldn't want to. Therefore, it's a contradiction in the will, and it's an imperfect duty. So, the important tests of these 4 duties. Feel free to read through this in your own time, but this is explaining it in a little bit more detail. So what would happen if we universalize the opposite? That's what you need to think to yourself. Could I universalize suicide? No. Could I universalize breaking promises? No. Could I universalize being lazy? Yes, but I wouldn't want to. Could I universalizing ignoring happiness? Yes, but I wouldn't want to. Okay? So you can read through this in your own time as well. So the first 2 duties, contradictions in the laws of nature. Can't commit suicide, can't break promises. Okay, and this is a text which is just explaining what I've said, so feel free to read through this in your own time. Okay, the second 2 are imperfect duties. Okay, so for example, not destroying life is a perfect duty. Don't be lazy, still a duty, but it's an imperfect one. What we can't do in the case of euthanasia if someone was asking you to kill them? Please say no, because you can't universalize it. Killing. Do not kill is a perfect duty. Okay, perfect or imperfect. Pause the video. Think about it. Okay, don't kill. Perfect. Don't lie. Perfect. Don't wake up late. Imperfect. Don't slap people in the face. Imperfect. Don't own a slave. Perfect. Don't commit suicide. Perfect. Don't drive on the right-hand side of the road. Imperfect. We could all do it at the same time, but we wouldn't want to. Okay, so the difference between a perfect and an imperfect duty for Kant is the possibility of it being universalized. Suicide is not universalizable. Contradiction in nature. Lying, not universalizable. Contradiction in nature. Perfect duty. Ignoring the happiness of others is possible, but we wouldn't want to live in that world. So it's an imperfect duty. Okay, so we're almost through the content. There's just one last thing we need to talk about, and this is called the summum bonum. Now, in Latin, the summum bonum means the highest good. Now, there's only one thing in the universe that's good by itself for Kant, and that's the goodwill. That means acting because of reason. So the highest good for Kant is when everybody is acting because of reason. This is sometimes also called the kingdom of ends. The total or highest good is when everybody is using their reason. The goodwill is the only thing that's good in itself, but the total good is when everyone's using reason at the same time. It's called a kingdom of ends. So to be a good thing, you have to fulfill your function. Okay, the function of a human being is to use reason. So the only thing that's good in itself is when we're all using our reason. This is the goodwill. So if you're performing an action because it makes you happy, then that's not the goodwill. So something is only fully itself when it's fulfilling its function. This person is not fulfilling their function. He's about to kill you because he's not using reason. To be a human is to be fully rational. Now here we get a problem. If to be fully human is to be fully rational, then you could argue that these people aren't fully human. This is somebody who's unconscious because they can't use reason. This is someone with severe learning difficulties. You could argue they can't use reason. And this is an unborn fetus. You could argue they couldn't use reason. So this is a big criticism of Kant's ethics. Kant might say they don't have the full power of reason, so cannot do their duty, which means they're not good humans. But when we all fulfill our duty and act according to reason, this is the summum bonum, the ultimate good. Does this ever happen in reality? Do we live in a world where people never tell lies, and never kill, and never steal? No. We live in a bad world, and Kant admits this. And this means that the summum bonum is impossible, because it's never happened, and it probably never could. And this is a big problem for Kant. The reason it's a big problem is because Kant says ought equals can. And you only ought to do something if you can do it. But if we look at experience, we see that people can't really do it. They don't seem to be able to act according to reason all the time. So this is a big problem for Kant. How can it be your duty if we don't seem to be able to do it? And this has the potential of destroying Kant's whole theory. We might not be free to do our duty if we can't do it. So something can only be our duty. This is our complaint, right? And Kant understands this. Something can only be our duty if we can achieve it. Remember, it can't be a squirrel's duty to read because it can't do it. We can't seem to achieve the summum bonum in this lifetime, the highest good where everyone is using their reason. And so Kant says the only place that you can do it is in the afterlife. So these are the last three things that Kant introduces at the end of his theory. They're called the three postulates. And postulates means they are assumptions. They can't be proven true, but they have to be assumed. So Kant says for his theory to work, we have to assume that three things are true. And these three things are, so feel free to read through this in your own time. Freedom, we have to be free to do our duty, although we can't prove that we are. We have to have immortality, which means we have to exist after death. And that's because we only ought to do what we can do. And we can't do our duty in this lifetime. So there must be a life after death where we complete our duty. And finally, there has to be God, because there has to be somebody who rewards people who have done their duty. But this is a very tricky part of Kant's theory, and lots of people hate it. They think it's awful, they think it's really bad. They think Kant has talked about the Enlightenment and the power of reason, and then he suddenly smuggles in these things at the end of his theory, immortality and God. And the problem with immortality and God is that this isn't based on reason. Kant says it's actually based on hope. You can't prove God exists for Kant. You can't prove there's an afterlife. And you can't prove that you're free. They are postulates, they're assumptions. But Kant says the only thing that's worthwhile is reason. If we can't prove them true through reason, then why are they there? Well, they're only really there so that Kant can demonstrate that it's still possible to perform our duty, even if we can't do it in this life. So this is a big, big problem, and lots of people dislike this. Another problem is Kant introduces God at the end to reward people for doing their duty. But at the beginning of his theory, he says that you don't need any reward for doing your duty, because the goodwill is the only thing that's good in itself. So big problems here, lots of room for criticism. So a quick summary of the end of Kant's theory. So after introducing the categorical imperative, Kant says it's our unique functional duty to use reason, or equals can, which means we only ought to do something if we can do it. Freedom to do our duty only works if we can do this. But we can't seem to do it in this life. We live in an imperfect world. Therefore, there must be an afterlife or a God. This afterlife unites virtue of happiness, rewards people, and it's based on these three things, which can't be proven. And Kant says if he doesn't have these three things, his theory collapses. Okay, so we have to all be able to do our duty. It doesn't happen in life, so there must be an afterlife. Those who behave morally should be rewarded. It doesn't happen in this life, so there must be an afterlife. Okay, massive criticism. It doesn't rely on reason. Kant seems to suggest that we need to rely on heaven to make his theory work. So he seems to be going back to religion. Kant said this part of his argument didn't rely on reason. It relied upon hope. And this is because you can't know anything that's beyond analytic, synthetic, a posteriori, or a priori knowledge. So we'll look at this in the philosophy of religion unit. Kant says that we can't prove that God exists. So it relies on hope. Freedom, immortality, and the existence of God. So feel free to pause this. Here's a quick chart just explaining why Kant needs these three things for his theory to work. Okay, so apologies for the car alarm in the background. Hopefully it's not too loud for you. So this is a famous painting by a painter who was inspired by Immanuel Kant. And his name's Caspar David Friedrich. And in this painting, he's trying to represent the summum bonum, the highest good. And this is because we're all, these two figures here are representing us, we're all striving towards the highest good, but we can never achieve it in this life. So these two people are looking at the distance, at the sun. It's the anchor of our moral focus, like the sun. And it cannot be known, you cannot ever reach it. The horizon's always disappearing in front of you, but it can be hoped for. Okay? So the summum bonum, the highest good, where all are performing their duty, only possible in the next life. Okay, so we're now on to the section where we can start criticizing Kant. Is Kantian ethics a helpful way of making a moral decision? Well, one person who criticizes Kant is called Postman. Postman questions whether Kant's categorical imperative is helpful. He asks what happens when we make bad moral maxims. So, for example, I could universalize, in theory, slapping everybody in the face. Does that mean it's acceptable? Well, I don't think Postman's response is very good because, to be honest, Kant's kind of covered that because he said that that would be a contradiction in the will. We could universalize it, but we wouldn't want to. Postman also asks, couldn't we universalize very specific maxims like, I can kill someone on a Tuesday if my name is Mark? And if we universalize that, then it is possible because only people who are called Mark can kill people and only on a Tuesday. I disagree with that because I think what Postman has done there is he's turned the categorical imperative into a hypothetical because he said, kill only if you're called Mark and if it's a Tuesday. So Postman is a good critic to introduce just to criticize him and go back to what Kant's response would be. So Postman's example is whenever it looks like life is going to be painful, we should kill ourselves. And that is universalizable because only those who are going through pain would kill themselves. And you could keep doing that, couldn't you? Because not everyone would die. It would only be those who are going through pain. And new people would be experiencing pain every day, so they would be able to keep performing the action. But again, I think he's turned categorical imperative into a hypothetical here. He said, only kill yourself if you're in pain. Okay? So in my view, Postman's criticism is poor because he's universalizing hypothetical imperatives. So I think Postman misunderstands Kant. So is Kantian ethics a helpful way of making a moral decision? So think about this yourself. Maybe make some notes. I'll put up now some ideas that I have suggested. So a big strength of Kant's theory is that it's very simple, really. I know it sounds very complex, but in reality, you've got a set of rules, right? Don't kill, don't lie, don't steal. And you never have to think about the hedonic calculus, for example. So it is quite simple, and it's consistent, and it provides rules that everyone has to follow. Big criticism is that it's too rigid, it's too strict, too abstract, relies on reason too much. Not everybody can use reason. Does Kant devalue other human beings then? Big criticism is that Kant doesn't value emotions. You can't lie to the axeman even if your mum is going to be killed. And does that create a theory that's even possible? Well, Kant even says it's not possible because he says that he needs to summon bonum because we can't perform our duty in this life. Okay, should an ethical judgment be based on the extent to which duty is served? So think about this yourself, maybe fill in some. Okay. So feel free to read through these in your own time. Kant definitely respects life, doesn't he? Disagrees? Maybe Kant makes us too robotic. Maybe humans should rely on their emotions. Okay, a similar question. Is Kantian ethics so reliant on reason that it unduly rejects other factors like love and empathy? Is Kantian ethics too abstract, too intellectual or complicated? Okay, and you can think about these in your own time. You also have lots of really good points that are in the OCR textbook and in my um, uh, handout that I will have given you. So my book, the ethics book. Okay, and here is a model essay which we'll read through now. Kantian ethics applied to business ethics. To what extent does Kantian ethics provide a useful tool in the context of business ethics? 30 marks. So beginning laying out the keywords. Kantian ethics is a normative ethical theory, which means that it tells us what we ought to do. It is also a deontological ethical theory because human reason is absolute and unchanging, which means that the moral law it discovers is absolute and unchanging too. Kant provides the categorical imperative for individuals to use to work out whether actions are considered good. In this essay, I'm going to argue that Kantian ethics does provide a useful tool in the context of business ethics because it ensures that people are treated as an end in themselves rather than solely as a means to an end, and the inherent dignity and moral worth of individuals is valued. Businesses are held accountable for their impact on individuals and the environment, and therefore have a duty towards stakeholders. Some of these key terms won't make sense yet because we're looking at business ethics next week. A stakeholder is just anybody who is affected by the business. Shareholders are a key stakeholder for any business. They buy shares in the business, and the company has a duty to act responsibly for these shareholders to ensure they get paid dividends. Again, this is next week's learning, so don't worry too much. Milton Friedman argued that businesses have no other responsibility than to produce profit. Any other motive is unethical because it is equivalent to stealing money from the shareholders. Despite this, businesses take on social responsibilities to improve their image with customers and investors, for example, investing in methods to reduce their carbon footprint. Kantian ethics demands that people are treated as an end in themselves. This means that individuals' dignity must be valued and the autonomy and rationality of people must be respected. In my view, this is particularly useful when dealing with corporate social responsibility because it ensures that businesses are not focused solely on producing profit and are aware of their impact on individuals. This is useful because it ensures that all stakeholders are valued rather than being treated solely as a means to an end. For example, if a business was making a decision about whether or not to move their production line to China from America, the impact of this change would be considered not only in terms of the profit being made, but also in terms of the potential employees in China, meaning that Kantian ethics provides an easy way of ensuring that businesses act in an ethical way. Another issue that arises in business ethics is the question of whether good ethics is good business. There are a number of ways this can be interpreted. However, Kantian ethics may say that business is naturally unethical because it goes against every time for self-interest and its motive is profit rather than the goodwill. If a business aims to act ethically, it may be missing out on profit. As a result, ethical decisions often have a negative impact on the business, and therefore the business would do better to act in an unethical way. In my view, when making such decisions, Kantian ethics is a useful tool because the categorical imperative provides clear guidance when determining whether an action is morally good. Kantian ethics develops principles that are universal and apply in every situation, which makes decision-making quicker because decisions are not made situationally. Someone might argue that Kantian ethics is not a useful tool because it is not possible to value the dignity and worth of every individual, as there are too many stakeholders involved. This means that adhering to the second formulation of the categorical imperative is impossible. For example, dairy businesses have to reconcile the needs of the dairy farmer with their customers. If the cost of dairy production rises, the ethical thing for a business to do would be to pay the dairy farmer more, because this treats the dairy farmer as an end in himself rather than solely a means to an end. However, this would result in customers paying more for their milk and the potential loss of business. The business environment is competitive and capitalist, which means that Kantian ethics is not useful because if businesses are focused primarily on their social responsibility, it could result in competitors taking advantage of this weakness by stealing their business. Perhaps Kantian ethics is useful to an extent, however, sometimes the principles have to be abandoned in order to continue to succeed as a business. In many businesses where unethical practice takes place, whistleblowers expose this practice in an attempt to make this more moral malpractice known. Norman Bowie criticizes whistleblowing because it violates a prima facie duty to one's employer. This means that in signing a contract, you are making promises to be loyal to your employer, and whistleblowing breaks these promises. Kantian ethics makes it clear that lying is wrong because it is not universalizable and fails to treat individuals as an end in themselves. This means that businesses are obliged to act honestly and follow the rules, and employees are obliged to keep the promises made to their employers. I believe this makes Kantian ethics a useful tool in business ethics because it ensures that all parties are acting honestly, which values the freedom, rationality, and autonomy of others. However, is this realistic? Benjamin Constant criticizes Kantian ethics on the ground that it is not realistic for society to always tell the truth. Sometimes lies are told with a good intention. Perhaps we should expect businesses to lie if it's for a good reason. For example, when products are recalled, companies often tell customers not to panic, when in fact the threat of the faulty product is high. Although the company is lying, their intention is to prevent fear, which would be considered by many as good. However, I would argue that companies are more likely to lie to increase profit rather than act out of concern for the well-being of individuals. From this perspective, Kantian ethics would be a useful tool because it would ensure that companies are acting because of reason and duty rather than because of selfish desire to increase profit. And finally, in conclusion, Kantian ethics does provide a useful tool in the context of business ethics because it prevents businesses from acting solely to increase profit and forces them to consider their impact on the autonomy and rationality of others. With large corporations, the usefulness of Kantian ethics may be limited because of the vast number of stakeholders involved and the difficulty in treating every person as an end in themselves. However, the categorical imperative provides a clear way for businesses to determine whether their practice is ethical, and it is important that businesses take seriously their corporate social responsibility, not only for those affected, but for the success of the business too. Okay, so a lot of this essay won't make sense until we have done the business ethics unit next week, so don't worry too much. But that is the end of the unit on Kantian ethics. Now, if you ever get confused because there's so much that we've gone through and it is very complex, please always simply go back to the first slide, which tells us in detail, or in brief really, what we need to know. What we need to know is this. Okay, so as long as you understand this, you should be fine when it comes to Kant. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you very much, Year 12.